This podcast is produced by the ABA Commission on Law and Aging. Listen to hear interviews and stories on topics related to law and aging, including best practice tips for professionals and career advice. Age is not just a number, it's an opportunity for growth and fulfillment. These episodes will explore the hurdles people face while aging, as well as opportunities for improving advocacy and strengthening the legal rights of others. Hi, I'm Beth Russo with the American Bar Association's Commission on Law and Aging, together with Erica Costello. You are listening to our Advocates of Aging podcast. Today, we have with us David Godfrey, Director of the Commission. We were lucky enough to catch David before he retires, but he is the director of the ABA Commission on Law and Aging in Washington, D.C. David is responsible for managing the research, training, and policy work of the Commission. Prior to joining the Commission, he was responsible for elder law programming at the Access to Justice Foundation in Kentucky. Mr. Godfrey earned his BA with honors at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, and his JD cum laude from the University of Louisville School of Law in Kentucky. He served on the board of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys and was named a Fellow of the Academy in 2019. David, first question for you is, tell us about your career. How did you end up where you are now?
Really long story. The law is a second career for me. I did something else for 15 years before I went to law school. While I was in law school, I interned a couple of summers with the legal aid program, and the elder law attorney that was there gave me fun and interesting things to do, and I fell in love with working with the legal issues of older adults. When I finished law school and passed the bar exam, I started a job with the Access to Justice Foundation in Kentucky, operating a legal advice and referral service for older adults, for persons age 60 and older. I did that for about 9.5 years. And along the way there, did some training and some writing, discovered that the office would pay for conferences if I was speaking, so I started speaking at conferences because I love to travel. I picked up a consulting contract with AARP. They were running a national legal training project on legal issues and aging at the time, because it paid a little bit of extra money, and it also brought extra travel. And I did 32 programs in 27 states for them over a period of about 6 or 7 years. And those things got me noticed, and that's how I ended up here at the American Bar Association. When a position opened up here, I was a known quantity because I'd written for Bifocal and I'd done training and I'd spoken at national conferences, and it opened the door for me to be here for the last 15 years.
Wow, that's incredible, David. The time really goes by when you've been with somebody or with an organization for so long. What has surprised you about aging, either personally or professionally, since you've had this long history in working in that field?
There's changing attitudes about aging. The old age of my grandparents is not the old age of my parents. They lived differently. They were healthier. They lived longer. They were more integrated or active in their communities. And the old age of we baby boomers, and I'm in the tail end of the baby boom generation, is different than the older age of our parents. Among other things, we're the 401k generation coming into retirement in full bore, which changes the dynamics of finances in later life. Healthcare has changed. Probably the biggest shock to me over the last 25 years was inclusion of prescription drug coverage in Medicare. And it's been around about 20 years now, long enough that people actually forget that there was a long time when prescription drug costs were a major burden for older adults. I was working in the field when Medicare Part D, the Medicare prescription drug coverage, came out. And what a revolution, what a change it was. And it was something that I thought didn't stand a snowball's chance in Florida of passing, and it did. Actually, in the middle of the night vote, it was somebody's landmark piece of legislation. So that's been a huge change. The emergence of Medicare Advantage plans, Medicare Part C or Medicare Plus Choice, as it was originally known. They're now more than 50% of the Medicare supplemental insurance market. And when I started doing this 25 years ago, they were less than 10% of the market, and they were only available in major cities and major population centers. They're much more widely available. And like I say, that the last statistic I saw, they've surpassed the 50% mark there. And those have changed the dynamics of healthcare for older adults in very, very significant ways, and in ways that, quite honestly, 25 years ago, we didn't foresee would happen.
And how did they do that? Like, for listeners that don't know what Medicare Advantage plans are, can you?
Medicare Advantage plans are private health insurance plans that replace traditional Medicare Part A and Part B in a Medicare supplemental plan. They tend to be more comprehensive. They also tend to have preferred provider networks or HMO type networks, and they've changed Medicare from virtually any healthcare provider in the country will accept Medicare to you need to know whether it's like private insurance. You need to know whether you're in network or out of network. If you're in network, it's going to be really good coverage. If you're out of network, it's not. They've changed the dynamic of who pays what and co-pays and deductibles. And most of them roll in prescription drug coverage now as part of the overall package. And they've changed the cost dynamics of the consumers out of pocket. But they really have changed the picture. My grandparents went to any doctor, any place in the country, and Medicare paid most of the bill, and their Blue Cross Blue Shield supplemental insurance made up for part of the difference. Where today we're looking at much more of a network type model, which is what most private health insurance in the country is based on anymore. And we're looking at actually lower out-of-pocket costs than what our parents or grandparents faced 25 years ago, 35 years ago, when they were using Medicare in the same way.
You're obviously on the precipice of retirement and have worked on a lot of projects at the ABA in the field of aging. So what's something that you're working on right now that's really got you excited, or something that you're wrapping up right now that's got you excited?
There are a couple of ongoing projects that current versions of which have altered my view. I just did a webinar recently on civil responses to elder abuse and elder abuse basics. And when it came time to put that program together, and the initial ask was, here's what we did 7 or 8 years ago, just freshen it up and run through it. And I read through what I've written, and our approach to elder abuse has changed to such an extent that I largely started over with a clean slate. I wrote a fresh issue brief on that because the approach to elder abuse has become much more person-centered and much more trauma-informed. And that was exciting because if we do it and do it right and we change our approach, it's going to result in a better outcome for an older adult who's living with the experience of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And I actually got quite excited about putting that program together and using a different approach that's much more person-centered, person-directed, trauma-informed, much less focused on let's intervene and do everything we can to try to protect the person. Let's talk to the person and find out what the person wants and make sure that in the process we're not hurting the person that we're trying to help. Likewise, and another program that I actually have coming up very soon, our approach to assessing capacity and the ethical issues of working with a client with diminished capacity have changed and transformed And we're seeing much more client-directed, client-centered, trauma-informed work for lawyers from an ethical standpoint when they're working with clients with diminished capacity than we were before. And it was exciting to see the change and the shift in the approach of how we're advising lawyers to ethically approach working with a client with diminished capacity.
How do you see your role within the context of the elder law field?
Well, for the last 15 years, it's been research and training, doing research, writing articles, writing issue briefs, kind of tip sheets and informational content for lawyers and other professionals in the field of aging, and tons and tons and tons of training. And that's been really the role that we have. We try to serve as an expert to provide guidance primarily to professionals in law and aging, lawyers and other professionals in law and aging, where they have a question or concern, and we try to give them advice. How would I analyze it? How would I understand it? What are some possible approaches, other resources to look to? Sometimes the best advice we can give somebody is who they need to talk to because it's not us. And that's been a really interesting approach and aspect of the work that we've done here. And it's unique to national technical assistance centers that are working on a national level, which is really what we are. And there are others that we've had the pleasure of collaborating with over the years who do similar work. But if it comes right down to it, there's probably only 50 lawyers in the country that do the work we do and do it the way.
So what exactly are you seeing as the most pertinent issues in the field right now of aging?
Well, the 800-pound gorilla in statutory reform is guardianship reform, and the emergence of decision support and supported decision making, but also a recognition of the need for due process protections and changes in the way guardianship law is practiced. And guardianship law ties in with elder abuse or adult abuse law because frequently guardianship is one of the interventions that comes up when someone is experiencing abuse, neglect, or exploitation. But the flip side of it is we're also seeing ongoing reports of abuse and exploitation, either of the process of guardianship, taking guardianship of people where it's really not necessary, and abuse by guardians, conservators, and other fiduciaries that's coming to light, and a re-examination of how the system works so that it protects the person. There's really a need for fiduciary education for lawyers and for guardians and conservators and agents under powers of attorney and healthcare agents, people who are making healthcare decisions, of the role of a fiduciary and the importance of putting the person's values, beliefs, and goals first, and the avoidance of self-enrichment, of commingling of funds, of taking advantage of the position of power that you're in. I think there's a huge need for, a growing need for ongoing education because most of the fiduciaries that are serving are not trained professionals. A lot of professionals that are trained in the field lack training in fiduciary duties. They're taught how to intervene and fix the problem, but not necessarily how to protect the person's rights, their goals in life, what's their values, what's important to them. And I think that's an emerging area that if we're not working in the next few years, we should be working.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. And just one last thing, do you have any final words of wisdom or advice for attorneys in the field or for future attorneys who may be looking to go into aging right now?
The generation that follows the baby boomers, 17 years after us, is even larger than the baby boom generation. So this, this focus on a large number of older adults in society is current today. And then we're going to have a little bit of a break for a few years, and then it's going to come back, and the next generation behind us there is even larger than we are. So the predominance or the presence of older adults in society is here today, and it's going to stay. So it's a growing area of practice, and one that's not going to change. And it, again, the approach it from a human services perspective, make it person-centered, make it value-driven, make it person-directed, change the role of the helpers to being that of supporters, people who are actually there to, how can I empower this person to live out their life the way they want to live out their life? What brings them happiness? What brings them value? That's really the huge value. There's a mountain of wisdom from working with older adults. They've had a lifetime of experience, and sit and listen to the stories. There's a lot to learn from listening to the life experiences of the clients that we've worked with. If I could give one piece of advice to elder law attorneys, it might be, rather than focus on Medicaid set planning, focus on what can we do to help people get care in the setting that they want. People want to be cared for at home. They want to die in their own home. They want to die in their own bed. What can we do to shift the focus away from asset preservation and tax avoidance to what can we do to fulfill people's wish of staying at home surrounded by the things that they love, the people that they love, the pets that they love, so that the end of their life is what their vision is, instead of what all too often happens in an institutional setting with people dying alone, surrounded by strangers, with beeping lights and beeping sounds and funny lights, and not the experience that they want. I think there's an emerging area here of changing the practice in elder law, shifting away from Medicaid asset planning to how do we plan for end-of-life care that gives people what they really want in life.
Well, we know that we've definitely learned a lot from listening to you today, and thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and experiences as being an advocate of aging. And thanks again for those who are joining us from our podcast. If you're interested in further information on this or other topics, check out our podcast notes on our website. You can listen to this and other episodes by visiting the ABA Commission on Law on Aging's YouTube channel. Remember to like and subscribe to be sure to get any updates. In the meantime, keep on advocating for the legal rights of all.